Spaces in bookbinding are very important, but you'd be surprised how easy they are to make. Hello and welcome to my studio. My name is Ido Agassi, and today I want to talk and show you how to make spaces. Also, I call them gaps or dividers, and they allow a hinge inside a book or a box to achieve a better opening to them. But more than that, I want to explain why to do it and how to use each thickness depending on what you need. So I'm going to start with the 3mm gap. This is just a piece of board that is 3mm thick. Okay, let me bring one that is cut to a different size because this one I'm using for I think 20 years, the same one. And I want to show you the example to use 3mm thick board. This is a portfolio I made, and the gaps between here are 3mm thick. Okay, that is because the board itself is 2.4mm, so I want it a little bit wider, but I don't want a lot of gap because when I'm going to close my portfolio, I want this area here to be close to the spine as possible. If I'll show you from this box I made last week in my video, you can see here I also used 3mm gaps, okay? And again, the board thickness is 2.4mm. And when I close it up, what you achieve is a very tight edge, so the spine and the boards are very close to one another, and then it is tight and it is not moving. And if I'll show you another example, this box that closed with magnets, you have 3mm gaps between the boards, but this piece that closes over the top here, you need it a little bit wider. So here I would put a 5 or 6mm gap. So let me show you how to make a 5mm gap. I would take two pieces of board which are 2.4mm, and I'm going to bring my glue the piece one side and the other. Of course, I'm using leftover materials. I'm sure if you are practicing bookbinding, you have leftover pieces. I cut them to the same size. Of course, the length is depending on what you are going to work on. If you are working with A4 or something bigger, I would do this longer, okay? A longer piece. But if you are working on A5, this would work perfectly. I'll move on to another scenario. I'm going to connect two boards of 3mm. So let me do that. Again, very simple. I'm just going to take a long piece and connect it to one another. Glue it completely. Bring it to the weight. You can bring another weight because I want to make sure it is exactly the same size. Or if it's not, just one side that would be straight, and that would help you that the spacer won't fall down when you put it between the boards, okay, so it would stay straight. And now we have one for 6 and we have one for 5mm. And I want to show you for what things I'm using the 6mm gap. When I'm making a rounded spine, that the spine itself is paper and not board, okay? Because this is a rounded spine, you need or paper or you connect it directly to the spine. That depends if you are using a tight back or just a hollow back, okay? When you open it, the paper allows an opening because in a hollow back, you have one layer that is connected to the spine and one connected to the outer cover. And then the gap I'm using here, I'll bring a ruler to show you, is around 5mm. So when I'm making the cover, I put a gap between the paper on the spine and the front and back board of 5mm. Okay, here I have an example of 6mm gap for this nice binding with poems by Umberto Acabal. If I'm showing you the book, I'll show you a bit of the inside. This is, by the way, it is called Fiesta, the paper. It has like a gray edge to give it a nice shade of the paper. So again, this is not a tight bag, but a hollow bag. So when you open it, the spine and the spine of the cover are not connected. They are moving apart. And when I make this cover, I have a gap of 6 millimeters between them. Now, the gap depends on the thickness of board. If you use thicker board than 2.4, let's say 3 millimeters, then the material will go inside the hinge here, so you'll need a little bit more gap. I'll move on to another scenario where you need 6 millimeter gap. This is a clamshell box. The clamshell box is made out of outside folder and 2 trays. And because the tray is 2.4 and the outer folder is also 2.4, that is why I use 6 millimeter inside the outer folder to allow the hinge to close very close to the spine, so there won't be a gap. But if I would put less than what I need, it would be difficult to close the box. It comes with experience, and what you can do, you can take a piece of masking tape and just cut a strip, let's say something like this. Let me peel it off. I'll put it on my weight. 1 and 2. And now I can bring one board. I'll bring a weight so it gives me a straight line. I'll bring the gap and the spine. Move the gap to the other side. I'm using now 3 millimeters. I'll bring the other side, take it out, and then you can put 2 strips just to hold it for a moment for you to check that everything is okay before you glue everything to your cover. You can just put it on your book and see everything works to your satisfaction. And then when you are sure, you can glue the cover. And if not, you can open it and let's say give it a gap of 6 millimeters and then see if that works better. And now I want to take my 5 millimeter and give it another layer because I want to talk about the case binding. So I'm adding another layer, and that is because I want to achieve a 1 centimeter gap. I'll connect it here. I'll connect another layer. And now I'm going to add a board that is 1.2 millimeters. This is quite similar to the thickness of material that you can find in food packaging. You don't need the original bookbinding board to do that. As you can see, the 1.2 is a bit longer. So I'll bring my knife and trim the edge. And now all of them together are 1 centimeter gap. And now I'll show you another example. So this is a case binding, a hardcover binding. Actually, this is the one for my class about how to make a hardcover binding. And the gap here is 1 centimeter. If I'll bring my 1 centimeter, you can see it's exactly the gap. And I want to explain. Let me bring one cover that is open. I have a 1 centimeter gap. And why is that? Because the spine is 2.4 millimeters, when you connect it to the book block, then you have 2.4 millimeters that are just going on the spine. If you see in the bound book, 2.4 millimeters, and inside the hinge, the material goes down a little bit more. So actually the gap itself is around 6-7 millimeters. And then when you open the book, you have all around the top, bottom, and the sides 0.5 centimeter. So that's why I decide on a 1 centimeter gap. But if you are using a thinner spine, and people ask me a lot about that, if you're using a thinner spine, then you can make the gap smaller because you don't need to go over the thickness of the spine. That is the reason when I calculate the 1 centimeter is because I'm working with this thickness of board. If you are using thinner board, then you can lower the gap. Okay? I'm going to show you another reason why to use a 1 centimeter gap. This is a very thick box. Okay? We have triple layer on the perpendiculars and double layer for the folder, and that is why the gap between the boards is 1 centimeter to allow a nice closing to the box. So what I recommend you to do is make a variety of thicknesses, and you are going to use them for years, okay? A 3mm one, maybe one for 2.4, 1 centimeter one, a 6mm one, and a 5mm one. Of course, you can also find something in your house in different thicknesses or buy something online from plastic, but I do recommend you to make one for yourself and then you made your own tool. And if you are interested in making your own tools, watch this video next. Thank you for watching and for being here. Consider subscribing if you are interested in things related to bookbinding, to box making, and much more. And I'll see you in my next video.